Good evening. Welcome to the December 2nd Financial Summit meeting. This meeting will be broadcast live and recorded by Foxboro Cable Access. Why don't we start with a pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so I'm going to kick this off before I hand it over to our finance team. So I just want to welcome the Select Board, the School Committee, AdCom for our Fiscal Summit to talk about all things budget tonight. And just before we start, though, I do want to address the elephant in the room, and that's something that we've been grappling with as we deal with forecasting, and that's the World Cup. You know, as we all know, we're going to have 7 major events in this community, and we do expect the town to see some major financial gains. But the key issue with this revenue is it is one-time revenue. So as Marie and I have emphasized over and over, one-time gains cannot responsibly be built into an operating budget. So just to put it into simple terms, imagine if we did do salary and other permanent programming based on World Cup year, and then what would we do the years following? So for that reason, it's not a sustainable way to run the municipal budget. So Marie's going to walk through our forecasting, and you'll see that she's modestly increased expectations for Gillette events, but she has to remain balanced and conservative. We actually have our local receipts reviewed by the Department of Revenue's Division of Local Services, and we have to justify those receipts. So we can't have peaks and valleys on that. It has to be sustainable and provable. So she has recommended that the stadium revenue be slightly higher this year, and I'll let Marie explain that, but we do need to follow best practices and ensure that the town remains fiscally sound. Foxborough is also, like every household and community across the Commonwealth, is dealing with higher fixed costs, including energy, health insurance, and other contractual obligations. So these increases are outpacing the 2.5% limit on the annual tax levy growth that Proposition 2.5 stipulates. So we are seeing a narrowing of our financial flexibility and fewer financial resources. And across Massachusetts, I don't know if you've seen it, but we are seeing impacts of the strain. Mansfield and Franklin have both experienced failed operational overrides and are now facing real cuts to personnel and services. Easton is confronting a major deficit of its own failed override, and they've actually recently voted to discontinue town ambulance services in an effort to try to offset the costs that are associated. So we're seeing these stories played out throughout the Commonwealth, and Foxborough is actually doing relatively well, all things considered. We're not immune, but the long-standing commitment to fiscal conservative approach has positioned us better than most municipalities and certainly most of our neighbors. And it's not easy, and the decisions are tough. But Marie will outline this evening that she does have a plan, and that the plan is designed to maintain service levels to the greatest extent possible and to avoid layoffs, but we do need to remain financially responsible. So, as I've alluded to, giving us this analysis is Marie Almodovar. She's our finance director. We have Brandon Roberts, our assistant finance director, and they are instrumental in keeping Foxborough's finances on track. She and her team do a stellar job and continue to strengthen our financial management, and she's going to walk us through the process tonight. So following Marie's presentation, we'll open the floor for board and committee questions and discussion. So thank you for your time. And
Hey, before we start, do you need to open a meeting?
oh yeah, they probably do. Yep.
Would someone like to make a motion to open the meeting?
I make a motion to open the school committee meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Similarly, can we have a motion to open the advisory committee meeting?
Move to open the committee.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion to open the select board meeting?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All set?
Yep.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. My name is Maria Almodovar. I'm the finance director. So I'll be here to go over several things in preparation for the upcoming budget cycle. So here we have the agenda. So I will give an update on our financial policies, where things stand, go over the closeout for fiscal year 25, the current status of fiscal year 26, show you all some tax comparisons with the surrounding communities, go over the 5-year forecasts, then getting into some budget history and other comparisons. Then we get into the debt service, current and long-term budget pressures, the budget strategy, one-time revenues, and then at the very end we'll have some time left for some questions. So just real quick, I wanted to mention that we just found out yesterday that the town has received the GFOA budget award for the 3rd year in a row. We also received special recognition for our long-range operating financial plans. Just something I wanted to note there.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So our financial policies. So as you may recall, these were updated in September of 2024 to better align with the best practices set by the state and the Government Finance Officers Association. So the first financial policy we have here is our unassigned fund balance. Our target is no less than 5% with a goal of 5 to 10% of the general fund operating budget. As of the end of June, we were at 11.68%. The next policy is for unassigned fund balance plus your stabilization fund. So this one has a target of no less than 10% with a goal of 10 to 15% of the budget. As of the end of June, we were at 17.98%. And I'll get into some of the details behind the revenues, why some of these percentages are higher than our targets. The next one here is our stabilization fund, no less than 5% with a goal of 5 to 7% of the budget. As of the end of October, we were at 6.3%. The capital stabilization fund, the target there is a balance of at least $100,000 with a goal of $2 million. As of the end of October, we had just a little over $1 million there. The next one is the overlay reserve fund, a balance of at least $440,000. The balance in this fund can go up or down depending on the tax recap and what it takes to balance that. The tax recap sheet is what we submit to the state to have our tax rate certified. So for our fiscal year 26 tax rate, our overlay amount was $1,417,427, and this was mainly due to new growth and some potential ATB cases that we have coming up. So when you have ATB, it stands for the Appellate Tax Board. So when you have a company, or usually it's a company that disputes their valuation, and then if we've pushed back, this goes to the Appellate Tax Board, and you're required to have an amount set aside in case you do have to pay out a large abatement. The next one is the operating budget reserve, so no less than 0.1% of the net estimated revenues for FY26. This was $82,312. And then finally, free cash. So our target was no less than 3 to 5% of the general fund operating budget. As of the end of June, we were at 10.14%. Then we get into, so this was the closeout for fiscal year 25. So our general fund revenue collections were $5.4 million higher than our estimates. Enterprise fund revenue collections were $1.4 million higher than our estimates. Our tax collections were 99.5%. State aid came in at 99.2%. Local receipts were 150.7%, or $5.8 million higher than estimates. This was largely due to investment income. We had some large permits for the Patriot Center, Training Center facility. Those came in at about $600,000. You also had the outside repair fees, $540,000 there. Hotel, motel, and meals tax. And then you had concerts. So in the FY25 budget, we included, our projections back then were 8 concerts. You see here, we also had on the soccer side, the Leo Messi game, which that counted as a special soccer event, so the concert fee applied versus the regular $2.05 for soccer. What else here? Our tax collections were short by $306,000. State aid was short by $101,000. And our local receipt surplus was used to offset this $408,000 deficit.
Marie, excuse me, could you just remind us what the amounts are we get for the tickets up there? There's so many people
Yes.
say, you hear mixed numbers, just so we...
So for football and soccer, the town receives, in fiscal year 25, it was $1.82. That amount went up to $2.05 per ticket. For concerts or any special events, we went from $3.16 per event to $3.56 per event. The next adjustment year will be in 2027, and we have it's based on the consumer price index. But for context,
Special soccer?
yeah, there's a special soccer fee. So when the cheapest ticket for a special soccer event is at least $62. So in this case, like the World Cup, for example, the minimum ticket will be well above $62. Because of that, the $3.56 will apply to World Cup versus the $2.05 for regular soccer. So for some context, when the lease started, we were at $1.15 for football and soccer and $2.19 for concerts. And we're up to $2.05 for football and soccer and $3.56 for concerts and other events. Water revenue collections, so water came in at 105% over the estimate, and sewer came in at 148.4% over the estimates. On the expense side, we had budget closeouts totaling $1 million. There were closeouts in the town managers, budget, finance, police, fire, land use, the schools, the reserve fund was left untouched, DPW, and also group insurance. So we had some savings from staffing changes. There was some savings due to grant funding. The police had the domestic violence and substance abuse grant. We also received some workers' comp reimbursements. The schools closed out $309,000, and group insurance ended up coming in less than our budget by $365,000. We usually carry a bit of a surplus in that budget because it's nearly impossible to budget group insurance at an exact dollar amount. You have to leave yourself some wiggle room for any staffing changes, things like that. So fiscal year 26, so our tax rate was set after the special town meeting. Residential tax rate is 13%, commercial is $18.24. Our current general fund revenue collections are $984,000 or 2.3% higher than this time last year. Local receipts are a little bit lower than they were at this time last year, $270,000 lower or 4.6%. This is due to having less permits and less event revenues. And also the outside repairs have moved over to their revolving fund. So that revenue is no longer coming into the general fund. Current general fund expenditures total $35.9 million or 38.6% spent. Water revenue collections are $178,000 or 4.1% higher than this time last year. Sewer revenue collections are lower than they were at this time last year, $393,000 lower. That was because last year they did have a good amount of sale of sewer capacity. We don't have that this time around. Current water expenditures are totaling $1.9 million or 26.4% spent, and sewer is at $805,000 spent or 40.9% expended.
So this is where we are year to date?
Yes.
So we're roughly 5 months.
As of the end of November, yeah. This slide here is just showing the tax rates for Foxborough and also the surrounding communities. So we're right around the middle. And our tax rate has gone from $13.51 in fiscal year '24 to $13 in fiscal year '26. The towns here, so the table is sorted by lowest to largest tax rate. There are a number of communities that do shift some of the burden to the commercial class. So you have Canton, Easton, Foxborough, Franklin, Mansfield, Norfolk, Norton, Plainville, Sharon, Stoughton, Walpole, and Rentham.
We should also note that the reason our rate is going down is because our assessed values went up. So under the way 2.5 works, you're not really allowed to just, up your overall rate just because someone's house went from $500,000 to $600,000. It still has to be spread with the 2.5%. So don't take that we reduced our rates. Basically, we reduced them only because of the overall pie and the assessed values being higher. So people are paying, unfortunately, more in taxes because their houses are worth more.
And in FY '26, we did also shift a little bit more to the commercial class. So that brought down the residential rate a little more. This slide here is just showing our new growth history for the last 3 fiscal years. So once again, Foxborough is right around the middle. It's sorted smallest to largest based on the fiscal year '26 values. So out of the 12 communities, Foxborough had the 6th highest new growth number in '26. In fiscal year '25, we did have a spike. That was because we had fiscal year '25 was a reevaluation year, so meaning that it's a state requirement that every 5 years you have your assessing department goes out to every single piece of property in the town to update the values. Usually when you have a revaluation year, it's normal to see a spike in new growth, but we also did have higher than usual growth in personal property. There was substantial personal property growth captured from the stadium and Normandy Farms and other businesses. This slide is just showing you the average single-family tax bill. So as Bill just stated, typically when your tax rate goes up, it's because your value is going down, and the reverse is that when your tax rate goes down, it's because your values are up. So the average single-family tax bill for Foxborough has gone from $8,223 to $9,016 in fiscal year '26. And any communities that you see with a 0 just means that they haven't had their tax rate certified yet. So I think the only one there is Franklin. So. This slide is showing you the average single-family value. So for Foxborough, we're right around the middle. Fiscal year '24 was $608,000, and in fiscal year '26 we were at $693,000. This is the excess levy capacity. So as I stated, Franklin hasn't had their tax rate certified, so that's why they have a 0 there. The towns are organized, the chart is organized based on the lowest to the largest in excess levy capacity. Foxborough is right around the middle. You'll see that most of these communities barely have anything left in excess levy capacity, meaning that they are essentially using most of their tax levy. Sharon does have a large amount of excess levy capacity, but they also have the highest tax rate of the 12 communities. If they were to use any of that levy capacity, their tax rate would be even higher.
So I don't understand this. Just talk about what levy capacity is.
So you have
what excess levy capacity would be.
So when you're working on the tax rate, so you essentially calculate your levy limit, which is last year's levy plus the 2.5% plus new growth, and then you tack on any debt exclusions that you have. When we go through and plug in all of the budget numbers for the tax recap sheet, what the state website does is it takes, so say if you're using ambulance fund, revolving funds, free cash, any of those other funding sources, it's taking, say if your overall budget was $101 million, it's pulling those funding sources, and then whatever is left is what you need from the tax levy. So your excess levy capacity is whatever is left from that final number that you don't end up using.
So is excess levy capacity good or bad?
It's good.
Do you want to have it?
No. The
No,
problem-
if you don't end up with a large number like Sharon, you anything that stays in excess levy capacity, you essentially lose that capacity. So trying to think of the simplest way to try to explain this.
Yeah, so think about it this way. If you don't tax to the levy max, as Marie just said, then for that given year, you lost that potential revenue to the town. You still have it available to you the following year, because again, you're still under the levy limit, but you never can go back. So if you take Sharon and you look at the amount that they've under taxed effectively, because that's exactly what's happening. In what she's talking about, a levy limit, it's your total valuation of the town times your 2.5% with your rates and stuff, and that's how you figure out how much you could tax. So the underuse of the levy limit is how much you could have taxed on top of what you did tax, okay? So as she said, if you looked at Sharon's current tax rates, which are extremely high, if they taxed to the levy limit, they would be much higher than they are now, and the taxpayers would be paying that. So having a levy limit, that in excess of where you are is only good if you really just don't need it. But they obviously need it because they're taxing at a level and bringing it in at a higher level and always have. I mean, they've actually done overrides, which is kind of interesting that they have a levy limit excess with still having tax as an override on top of that. That almost makes no sense, but at the time, they probably didn't have the levy limit, excess, so that's why they would do the override.
So what has Canton's strategy been? They have higher values, lower taxes, and excess capacity.
They shift to the max, or they shift the max to the commercial class. So if you look at their commercial tax rate, it's not on one of the slides, but I did write it down. So Canton's commercial tax rate is $19.67. So they shift the max to the commercial class. I think, and I know this just because of meetings that we've been in recently, they do have some significant debt service needs coming up. So I think they're building up this excess levy capacity, but then they're going to end up using it when that time comes.
Okay.
So some communities do that. They leave the money in excess levy capacity, but then end up using it after the fact. Foxborough, on the other hand, like most of our surrounding communities, don't have that flexibility. We need to use our levy, or the majority of it.
And the other thing this slide and the past slides didn't show, which is an important concept, is that many of the communities around us have done overrides in the years, and they're still at their maximum levy as far as they've used it all. So they've really upped their taxes on top of what they were capable of doing. So it's we're fortunate that we sit in the middle, and we haven't done, which doesn't seem to be a very popular concept in town, as an override, but we've still been able to manage our budget in general.
So we get into the forecast. So on the revenue side, the assumptions that we're using is that the levy limit will grow by the 2.5%, plus a new growth estimate of $850,000. I did meet with our assessor a few weeks ago, and he felt that this number was a good starting point. As we get through the budget process, we may or may not be adjusting this amount. Then you tack on the debt exclusions, which total $2,690,000. This does include the 3 new ones for the community center, the DPW facility, and the police locker room. State aid right now is projected to remain flat, except for minimal increases to Chapter 70 at 1.5% and unrestricted general government aid at 1%. Local receipts are projected to grow by $613,000 or 5%. And then water and sewer and direct costs are projected to grow by $61,000 or 4.4%. Couple things to keep in mind is tax collections are never at 100%. State aid is also never at 100%, so you need to make sure that you have a surplus on your local receipt side to cover those revenue deficits. For context, state aid From fiscal year 23 to 24, the overall increase in state aid was 1.52%. From fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25, it was 0.92%. And from fiscal 25 to fiscal year 26, it was 3.3%, but the majority of that was Chapter 70, which could only be used towards the school budget. The state also almost never gives you what is posted on their cherry sheet, so it always ends up coming in lower. Usually it's something to do with an adjustment to the charter school calculation. They always find a way to give us less than what they say they're going to give us. Local receipts, so when we balanced the budget and had our tax rate approved, we used a budget amount of 12.26%. Initially, the budget that was balanced at town meeting had us using 12.38 million. So when you balance your budget and have your tax rate certified, if you have any new growth that comes in higher than your projections, you're able to adjust your local receipts to then do that final balancing. On the next piece is free cash and overlay surplus. So for now, we're keeping these the same. So free cash to be used for the operating budget at $665,000 and overlay surplus at $750,000. It's important to note that these funding sources are being used to pay for the debt service for this building, the town hall, and the borough school. So we're not using any of this money for salaries or operating expenditures. They're restricted to just debt service. On the operating side, expenditure side, so the forecast uses an assumption so that base operating expenses, including the schools, grow between 3 to 3.5% over the 5 years. Debt service is based upon your debt service schedule. Those are set numbers. For fiscal year 27, our debt is decreasing by 1.9%. The operating budget will include those new debt exclusions, and then our reserve fund budget will grow by the target that we set in our financial policies. On the fixed cost side, we're using 14% for our health insurance, Medicare tax to grow at 3%. Our pension assessment in fiscal year 27, we have the actual dollar amount from the county, so this is $6,750,399, or 2.18% increase. Property and liability insurance is projected to grow at 10%. Workers' comp also at 10%. The Southeastern Regional Assessment at 7.5%. The OPEB contribution will remain at the $1,064,000, and then state assessments are projected to grow 3%. Oh, went a little too far. So this is what the actual 5-year forecast looks like. You'll note that in FY26, the percentage growth was 5.1%, but that was largely due to the new debt exclusions. So that, as you know, with the debt exclusion, that revenue can only be used to pay for the debt service. When you deduct out those new debt exclusions, the actual revenue growth was around 2.96%, which is more in line with what we see year after year. Thing keeps getting stuck. I'm not even pressing it, it's doing it on its own. There we go. So on the expenditure side, using those assumptions that I just went over, this is what the numbers would look like over the next 5 fiscal years. Departments, as I mentioned, are projected to grow between 3 to 3.5%, but our fixed costs are obviously growing at much larger rates than that. So this is your other funds, or enterprise funds, and then your the other amounts that we're required to raise. So your overlay, and then your state and county assessments. So bottom line, you'll see the annual percentage growth on the expense side, and then at the very bottom, the cumulative surplus or deficit. So in fiscal year 26, that $24,713 that you see there, that's what that excess levy capacity number was for fiscal year 26. When you do a 5-year forecast, it is normal to see large negatives at the very bottom there. You'll note that obviously those numbers are increasing. So at some point, we'll need to have a conversation on an override, or maybe if we start to see, trying to think, maybe some new growth somewhere, maybe the former state hospital, maybe that can help us out a bit.
But why do you say that it's normal to have big deficits?
I mean, you are projecting out into the future. Most 5-year forecasts do show a negative at the bottom. If you ever see one and it's like completely balanced, it's not truly accurate. Like I said, we're looking out into the future, using assumptions based on what we know today. Obviously, as you go through these individual fiscal years, the numbers will change. But what you do see is that we're going from, so for fiscal year 27, from a negative $610,000 all the way to $6.6 million in fiscal year 31.
Are we going to get copies of this?
Yes.
Okay.
This here is our operating budget history for the last few fiscal years. So in fiscal year 26, the overall budget, so municipal side was made up 25.2% of the overall budget. Schools was 48%, and then the fixed costs, which were both for town and schools, were 22.4% of the budget, and debt service was 4.4% of the budget. At the very bottom, I also show the compound annual growth rate. So for municipal, it was 4.03%, schools 3.08%, fixed costs was 5.57%, and debt was 2.33% from fiscal year 17 to fiscal year 26.
So it shows that the schools is growing at a greater percent?
Not at it. When you look at the growth rate, their percentage is lower than the municipal and the fixed cost side, but their budget makes up 48% of the overall budget. So their budget is much larger, but it has grown at a smaller rate than some of the other categories have.
But Marie, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
So fixed costs, one of the biggest parts of that is health insurance,
Yes.
Pensions, and so on. The biggest employer in the town is the school side.
Yes.
So one of the biggest components of that fixed cost is schools, significantly, 400 to 500 employees as compared to about 280 or 300 on the municipal side. Secondarily, when you're looking at fixed costs, that's also where our schools, where we're paying debt. Under debt service, we're paying, debt in that area as well. So, when you look at it from a comparable point, the third component to that is on the municipal side is the fire department. Fire department's budget includes what we spend from their EMS funds that they receive. We've gone from about $600,000 in 2014. I think we're spending about $2.6 million now, including their capital. But that's in their budget. It's not being paid by taxpayers. It's being paid by users of the ambulance fund. And the majority of the ambulance fund is generated by people outside of Foxborough because of where we're located in the stadium and other events on the highways and stuff. So when you look at it strictly the way that that's looking at it, it doesn't really give you the true accurate picture of what each one of those departments percentage-wise is, because you'd have to really break that all down and put it back together to get it.
And I will be getting into some of that town versus school breakdown in a few slides. So this slide here is just showing you the general fund budget comparisons, Foxborough and our surrounding communities. So Foxborough is right around the middle. So our fiscal year 26 budget was $92.4 million. The dollar increase was $3.5 million. Foxborough had the fifth lowest FY26 budget and the sixth lowest dollar increase from fiscal year 25 to 26. This same data, but showing you the percentage increase from fiscal year 25 to 26. So Foxborough's percentage increase was it was higher than usual, once again because of those new debt exclusions. when you back out that new debt, the increase was 3.8%, which would put us as the fourth lowest on this list. On the right side, you have the average percentage increase for the last 4 fiscal years. Foxborough is the fourth lowest there. So here we're getting into the operating budget splits. So when you're looking at our operating budget, just strictly operating budget, and backing out those fixed costs, this is so this slide here shows you what the town share is versus the school share. So in fiscal year 26, the town's share of the operating budget was 33.9%, and the school share was 66.1%. When you then take the operating budget and you include the benefits and fixed costs and allocate those to the town and the schools, this is where what you get in dollars. I have a slide, a few slides down that will go over this in more detail. But if you simply just take the school operating budget versus the overall town budget, you get a 48.3%, but fixed costs and debt service really should also be factored in, so you could get that the true split of municipal versus schools.
Do you have that number?
What was that?
Do you have that number of the true split?
Yes, I'll be getting into that. I have a slide with the actual numbers. So here are those fixed costs and benefit splits for fiscal year. So this is based on the fiscal year 26 budget. So it goes over debt service, health insurance. So the blue is schools, yellow is municipal or town side. You'll see that most of our fixed costs and benefits are largely on the school side. So health insurance, for example, is split 31.8% town, 68.2% schools. This table here shows you the actual dollar amounts. So back in the spring, town meeting approved a budget of $92.4 million. In the middle there, you have this amount was broken out, town versus school. So bottom line, when you look at the overall operating budget and once you allocate those benefits and other fixed costs to the town and school side, the town percentage of the overall budget was 36.3%, and the school percentage is 63.7%. This slide here goes over our capital budget splits going back to fiscal year 16. In fiscal year 26, the split was 70.7% of the CIP budget was for the town side and 29.3% was for the school side. Most of the town side CIP is public works at $11 million. You have general government at $2.4 million. And public safety at $6.4 million, but as Bill stated a little while ago, a lot of the public safety CIP budget is funded from the ambulance fund. And then the schools was at $6.1 million over the 11 years here, from fiscal year 16 to fiscal year 26. So the numbers that I just mentioned are the totals for the time period, not just fiscal year 26. So from fiscal year 16 to FY 26, the town spent $20.2 million on the town CIP budget, and then $6.1 million for the schools' CIP budgets. So then we get into state aid and the school budget. So as I mentioned earlier when I was talking about state aid, so Chapter 70 is the largest portion of our state aid that can only be used to fund the schools. Any recent increases automatically go to the school budget. The state funding levels remain well below where they really should be at. That's why we use conservative numbers for our 5-year forecast. why the next piece here is why Chapter 70 increases don't mean that we increase the school budget dollar for dollar. Additional Chapter 70, as I said, it goes to the school budget, but then what it does is it frees up other local revenues for municipal departments, and then those fixed costs that are coming in at a much larger rate than the 2.5%. This also ensures that there's balanced funding across the town while also meeting those school spending levels.
Marie, quick question. So we're hearing that, the governor, obviously the state is going to be working on their budgets and they may be making cuts too. Is the Chapter 70 a possible cut? And then would trickle down to us, or is that something that it's a certain percentage that they tend to stay at? Is there a possibility we would get less money, I guess, is the question.
Could be a possibility. I know that in recent years they have been using that millionaire's tax to fund to help fund the schools and transportation, so Chapter 90. But it's kind of tough to say. As we go through the budget process, the state's going through their process, so we'll adjust our numbers as they go through that process. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see some cuts there. And then the other side of it is the unrestricted government aid. Barely see any
Historically,
increases
has
in
the
that.
Chapter 70 money ever gone down?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to look back. But as I mentioned earlier, state aid, the growth there hasn't been that huge. From fiscal year 23 to 24, it was 1.5%, and then 24 to 25, it was 0.9%, and then in the current year, it went up 3.3%, but most of that was Chapter 70. Then we get into the net school spending history, so just showing where the town has been. So that required net school spending, that's an amount that's calculated on the state side with DESI. Then we show what our actual net spending was, and then the column to the far right shows the over and under of that net school spending number. The FY25, I couldn't find the actual net spending number, so that's the numbers that was used as the budgeted net school spending. And then
I don't understand. What is net school spending?
So there's a formula, like I said, this is done at the state level. There's a formula that determines, so the state takes what you need to essentially, you come out to, this net school spending is the minimum that you're required to spend on your school district. So the state tells you, okay, you're gonna get X amount, and then you need to come up with this amount at minimum. So that required net school spending is set by DESI, and then the actual net school spending is where we actually ended up at. So we are well above that minimum that's set by the state. So free cash and stabilization funds. So once again, that free cash number, so that's certified annually by the Department of Revenue. It's comprised of budget turnbacks, revenue surpluses, and prior year balances. It's primarily used for capital projects, one-time expenses, or for building up your reserves. Stabilization funds are municipal, they're essentially the equivalent of a savings account. These are intended for long-term financial stability and emergency or one-time needs. The stabilization funds require a town meeting vote to transfer money in and out of these funds. Now, we often hear, when we go through the budget process, we often get asked, why can't you use free cash, for salaries, or why can't you use a stabilization fund? Well, these sources are one-time revenues. Using them for recurring expenses like salaries creates a structural deficit. When these funds run out, the town would obviously face some layoffs, cuts, or even larger tax increases. So the best practice is to match one-time revenues with one-time expenses. And that's what the town has done historically. A lot of our capital is funded via free cash. And then your stabilization fund, that's your true rainy day fund. So each year, so not each year, but whenever we go out to borrow money for a large capital project, so back in June, when we borrowed money for the community center and the DPW facility and the police locker room, when we had our AAA credit rating reaffirmed, those rating agencies like to see that you have reserves built up, because if something were to go wrong, you still have to pay your debt, you still have to pay people's salaries. Here. So this just shows where Foxborough compares to our surrounding communities. So in this, let me see here. So our free cash number which was certified at the end of June was $9.4 million, and our stabilization fund was at $5.1 million. Once again, any zeros that you see just means that they haven't, in this case, they haven't submitted their balance sheet, so their free cash hasn't been certified yet. This slide here shows you our outstanding debt. So we currently have $69.4 million in outstanding debt. This is all of our debt, including debt that is paid for by the enterprise funds. On the right side, I show our debt service schedule for the next 5 fiscal years. So as you'll see, your debt service is decreasing. I did want to note that in fiscal year 28, we have debt exclusions falling off, which total about $248,000. And then in fiscal year 31, there's another $535,000 falling off. So when thinking about future projects like the Taylor School, for example, we might want to time those maybe for fiscal year 28, or if not, then fiscal year 31. That's essentially what we did with the 3 recent projects. So we had, there was a school debt exclusion and a public safety debt exclusion that fell off around $500,000, $600,000. So what that ended up doing is that when we borrowed the money for the new debt exclusions, the tax impact was lessened versus if you had no debt exclusions falling off. This slide here just shows you, so that's 69 million, so 25.6 million is on the town side, 13.6 million on the school side, 29.8 million of that is water, and then 240,000 is septic loans. On the right side, it's just broken out, non-excluded versus excluded, and self-supporting is the enterprise fund debt. This slide here is just showing you how Foxborough compares to our surrounding communities in terms of our outstanding debt. So Foxborough is just slightly above the middle there at that 69.4 million in outstanding debt. So getting back to the budget, so our, some of our current and long-term budget pressures are increases to those fixed costs, so your health insurance, property, liability, and workers' comp, and pension costs also continue to rise. We're also still seeing supply chain issues and significant cost increases to services, supplies, equipment, vehicles, et cetera. We're also seeing increases to our utility contracts, so our COVID, as they call them, the COVID specials are no longer. We're seeing a 32.8% increase in electricity and 40% in gas. We're also seeing an increase in state assessments on the charter school side, increases to the regional school assessment, and on the other side, minimal increases to our state aid. There's also the funding for OPEB. Prior to it being mandated. Once again, that's another area that S&P, or the bond rating agency, focuses on. They like to see that you're tackling your major liabilities. We also have the debt service for the non-excluded projects. So as I mentioned earlier, this building and the Borough School, that 1.3 million comes from free cash and overlay surplus because we do not have the recurring revenues to pay for that debt. We also have staffing needs in police, fire, and schools. There's also funding that's needed for the collective bargaining agreements. On the capital side, we have some needs there. The Taylor School, we have the PFAS treatment plants, school technology needs, roads and sidewalks, the dams, stormwater management. And it's all, at the end of the day, it's all a balancing act and just maintaining the current service levels while enhancing services were needed. So options for the budget and the budget strategy. So as we've done in the past, we have essentially 3 options for the budget. So option 1 is a level funded budget. What this would do is it would keep the budget exactly where it's at, which would result in a reduction of staff and services, and this would prevent the town from addressing staffing and budgetary needs. Option 2 would be a level services budget. So you maintain your current service levels with incremental increases based on department and community needs. That's what we've done for the last 3 budgets. Option 3 is setting a percentage increase limit. This obviously would place a limit on the overall percentage increase, and it would also prevent the town from meeting current and future service demands. The budget strategy, so there's obviously funding that's needed to comply with our contractual increases in operational and fixed costs that are outside of the town's control. The total initial revenue projection is at $110,969,912, which includes $10.9 million from the enterprise funds. If you were to translate this into a percentage, you're looking at 3 to 3.5%. The expectation is that departments will put forward their needs and prioritize both current and future needs. And expense budgets, not salaries, will be level funded where possible, and departments are expected to submit clear documentation and justification for any additional funding that they need.
So Marie, I know we've done the level service, right? And so I know we've given that combination is obviously last year and then this year, you know, so that's more like a request. We've given Paige that 3 to 3.5, where we would like her to try to bring all the departments in. If we had gone to 3, that means we lock in a certain number. So the best bet is, we don't want to get rid of services. I mean, I think the people of town expect a certain amount from them. So that for us in Foxborough, that's the best way to do it, is basically the level services, and
Yes.
then to give Paige, the board of selectmen will give you where we would like you to try to stay. You think that's the best for
Yes,
our community?
Marie, do we still have pressure from the county on the assessments for pensions?
We do, yes. So thanks for reminding me. So the Norfolk County, they control our yearly assessment. So up until recently, they were targeting a funding date of 2030, which would have resulted in our pension assessment increasing by $1.1 million into fiscal year 27. Now, Paige, along with most of the other town managers in the county, reached out to the county and said, hey, you guys can't do this to us. And I joined her in several meetings, and basically, after a lot of back and forth, the county decided to agree. They agreed to extend that funding to, I believe they're out to 2032 now, which for us means that our increase, rather than being 1.1 million, it's down below 300,000 going into fiscal year 27. But that's just a 1 year. They have to go back and have another study done. So.
I feel like we're going to be doing this every year because they keep trying to
They have,
increase it.
the state has set a deadline for all pension systems to be fully funded by 2040. The county claims that PERAC will not accept any funding schedules that go past I believe they said 2037. But I mean, what the managers were saying is you still have some wiggle room there. Like, why are you being so aggressive? You can't, I mean, we were looking at 1.1 million, but I think Sharon was looking at over $2 million, an increase from fiscal year 26 to 27. It's like you can't expect communities to be able to fund that when we're limited to the 2.5%. And then if you're not seeing a lot of new growth, the state aid is not really giving us much. It's like, we were happy that they were willing to work with us, but it doesn't sound like, it sounds like we'll be back at this next year.
So what
And they reduced the date. They were trying to go downward, because weren't they
No, they had to adjust some of their they knew that some of their assumptions were not appropriate for the time, so they tweaked one of them, and those are the ones that they stretched out more to make the impact less, but they still have a few other assumptions they want to tweak through the actuarials. So we think, and again, they're seemingly fixated on doing it sooner rather than later. We're like, just smooth it out, give us smooth, but they worked with us this time, but it took five meetings at least, and a lot of, we have hats off to Sharon, they really fought the big fight, they had the most to lose, but we were warned that they'll be looking at it again next year, doing another study, and I envision that we'll be back in the same boat, lobbying again to smooth it out, because communities cannot afford what they're proposing.
Are we still on track? I know at one point when I was on AdCom, with us luckily having the meals tax to use to help fund it, I thought we were, at one point, the number was 2032, that we were on.
For the OPEB, yes.
Yeah, for OPEB.
Yes.
So are we pretty much?
Right now, based on the latest study, I believe we were looking at, there were some increases so our overall liability did increase because of that surviving spouse benefit that town meeting approved a couple fiscal years ago. It added $3 million to our liability, and I believe we're up to 2034. I can't find the paper right now.
Which that's kind of a sliding scale.
Yes.
All depending on.
Investments, everything.
So as long as you continue to
Yeah.
put money away,
Yeah.
eventually what happens when you're fully funded, so both on the pension and the OPEB side, once you're fully funded, this means that instead of, like for the pension, for example, instead of having a $6 million assessment, it might drop down to say like $1 million. On the OPEB side, instead of, basically the way, and this is stated in our financial policy, so once that pension system is fully funded, the majority of that $6 million will be diverted to pay down the OPEB liability faster.
So I think to answer your question previously, as far as, how do you get negatives when you're going out to the 5-year thing, drop-offs like that can make a calculation difference, but you can't be guaranteed the drop-off because, again, as they're doing the actuarials on a regular basis, it could go up instead of coming back down. But once we actually do fully pay it, then you get that kind of a reduction as far as overall.
The 110 million that you have there, that includes the 2.5% increase, like tax?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Yeah, that's everything.
That's the full increase.
Taxes locally.
And that will give an increase to the operating budget of 3 to 3.5%.
Yeah, if you were to translate it to a percentage, yeah.
Yeah, so then if we did level services, I can't remember the number that you said, we need what, 3.58?
Level service, service would depend, but if you simply took the $1 or $10 million, that would be a 3 to 3.5% increase from the current
Right, I was just, you had previous slides that had numbers of like, I thought it was like 3.58, were those?
I think it was 1.5, was it the state aid?
No, it was like the total budget.
Way back at the beginning.
Might be.
So, the budget splits, maybe. Yep, we'll go back.
This one here?
Yeah, is it that one? I can't see that on the
No.
screen. Hold on, I gotta wait.
No, I don't think that's it.
It was before these. Oh. Nope, not that one. It just showed, I thought it was showing our,
Is it this one here, maybe?
no. All right, I'll have to wait till I get the package.
Yes, I will share this with all of you, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
This one, is it this one? Yeah, the 3.4%, the forecast. So according to that forecast that you were just showing, it said it showed 3.4%.
For the expenditure side, yeah.
And so what else, and then, so what's the total needed? Like, what's the total forecast?
So right now, there's that revenue number that I just went over, that 110,969,000. So if you estimate, obviously, I mean, this is a very early look. We don't know what departments are going to ask for. But if the forecast assumes that the budgets will grow between 3 to 3.5%. And then obviously your fixed costs are coming in a lot larger than that. So the forecast here is showing a 3.4%
Where do you see?
increase.
And that was the number on the other side, that 3.4%.
Shelby, when I was just saying, like, I don't know what this board is this year, because we haven't had that
Yeah.
discussion, but we've been somewhere between 3 and 3.5
just wanted
to
to
recommend to
understand
town
with the 110.
manager, and then she,
Yeah.
you know, she'll do how she does her direction down to her department heads, and in a perfect world, we'll come in there.
Yeah, no, I just
until-
want to understand if that
yeah.
current forecast fell within this 3 to 3.5%, that's all.
Yes, and it does, yeah.
It's, okay, thank you.
So, so as Paige addressed a little while ago, the elephant in the room is the World Cup. So once again, as I stated earlier, that World Cup, what that means for the town is it's a one-time event, meaning it's one-time revenues. The appropriate uses for these revenues are what we've done in the past, which is, you know, capital projects, equipment vehicle purchases, stabilization funds, covering any one-time departmental costs. So for example, if you have any departments that are incurring any planning costs for World Cup, you could tap into free cash to pay for those things and keep those out of the operating budget. You could also pay down some debt. So our operating budgets fund ongoing services. Using some of this one-time money will create that structural deficit. And what will happen essentially is next year the cost will remain there, but the revenue is no longer there, which will then lead to cuts and tax increases or any service reductions. And the goal here is to maintain long-term financial stability. If you were to use one-time revenues to fund salaries, for example, that would be very fiscally irresponsible. So what I've done here is I've given you, as the board, the option to decide what happens with these one-time revenues. So I've come up with 4 options. One is to use this money towards our capital budget, which is what we tend to do with our extra free cash. Option 2 is to pay down the debt. This option can get a little complicated. I did reach out to our financial advisors, and what they explained is that we would need to essentially call bonds, meaning that we redeem them before their maturity date. Usually you do that when you're looking to refinance at a lower rate. The rates now are not lower than they were back when we borrowed that money, so that's probably not the best option, but it is an option. Option 3 would be to build up your reserves, as we have been doing, so that general stabilization fund, which is your rainy day fund, and then continuing to put money away for the Taylor School project in that capital stabilization fund. And then option 4 is would be a combination of 1 through 3. So as I'll remind everyone, so our financial policies, we did add a section 12 last year. So as you know, every municipality in Massachusetts is required to produce a balanced budget. Our financial policy states that the town shall not balance the budget by using one-time or other non-recurring revenues for ongoing expenditures. The town shall not use budgetary procedures that balance the budget at the expense of future years. The town's current use of free cash to pay for the debt service is to pay for the debt service for those non-excluded projects. This will continue to be addressed incrementally over a period of time, so that ultimately free cash is only used to support one-time expenses or to build up reserves.
So on that third bullet, the town shall not use budgetary procedures that balance the budget at the expense of future years. So what would be some examples of doing that?
So an example of doing that would be using free cash to pay for salaries. Or using your stabilization fund to pay for salaries.
Okay.
Mary, we talk about it as an elephant in the room, but I think it's also important to put some kind of context behind it. And you correct me if I'm wrong, both of you. But when I did the calculation on 7 games, only 6, which will be in the fiscal year, at the current rate that we're going to get, I came up with about $1.7 million.
Yep.
So it's not a massive amount of money. Also, during that same time frame, June to early July, we could have and would have had concerts. So there's an offset to that. So I hear people talking about it like we're getting this, $100 million windfall here. The town of Foxborough is not getting much of anything out of this. Matter of fact, the two chiefs are taking on a massive headache for 39 days straight activity up there, which means we have to maintain that facility for 39 days every day, whether it's an event day or not. They have to have police and fire details up there. Yes, the stadium or somebody is paying for it. Right now, we're a little bit at risk, and there's questions on whether or not we'll license if they don't come to the table and actually put their selves on the table, not us, because we're too small of a community to cover that kind of cost. But we're looking at a $7.7 million cost to put on those from what we normally would provide to the stadium. So again, this is not some panacea of money that the town is going to get. Matter of fact, quite honestly, with what we're going to go through and what these guys have already gone through for the past 9 months or so, or even a year, isn't even worth, in my mind, the amount that the town will get as an additional income.
But did you or Marie estimate the amount the town is likely to get, a net over if they had concerts?
It'd be the same. It's the same rate, the $3.56.
Yeah,
per-
I mean, it's not likely they would have had 7 concerts during
Yeah.
that time frame, but let's say that they had 3 concerts. So you're only talking, at that point, a $900,000, increase for the year. We're not funding the world with that for a one-time event.
And we only had 4 concerts this fiscal year.
Right.
When normally, like Marie uses 8 to 9 in her, and she bumped it up this year, but this past fiscal year, the way it played out, we only had 4 concerts. And then now the stadium's shut down until the end of the fiscal year, except for World Cup. So the concerts that would typically happen in the spring are not happening.
Right.
So
So if
We're
you
actually at a
took the 4 that
deficit.
we've already had and she's got 8 budgeted, it's like we got 3 extra events.
Did the town, no, I'm sorry, this is an unrelated question, but did we have like any say in like the proposal and getting World Cup here? Or was it just something that was done independently?
So we had the town had to say in saying that we would support, from a positive point of view, World Cup. We have not licensed the event yet. And they haven't even applied. We have put.
We're out there promoting, trying to get it.
Yeah.
Could you pull
Can you
the
put your
microphone closer to you, Shelby?
Sorry.
Yeah, that was for Mr. Beck.
Yeah, so I think the issue really here is that, and we put down on the table recently that they have to have their application in by early January, because again, we have some very large concerns and that we're not going to put the town at a financial risk if they don't come to the table and do what we anticipate or expect that they should do.
Thank you.
So some questions to consider. Does the town want the same level of services? Do we want to allow for increases based on need as we've done for the last 3 budget cycles? How do we address those staffing and capital needs? Does the town wish to explore new revenue options, maybe approve new developments to increase that tax base? The other big question is how will those one-time revenues from the World Cup be used? And then finally, will the town consider a future override to address some of these budget shortfalls? And then lastly here, the state has a municipal data bank, which has all of this data. So what we did here is we capture the data for fiscal year 17 through fiscal year 26. You'll see that the number of overrides obviously is increasing on both ends. The total that are being requested, but also the total that are being approved. For some context, we had, so most recently, Franklin, Easton, and Mansfield all went for overrides. Easton went for override totaling $7.3 million, which failed. Franklin went for a $3.8 million one in the current fiscal year. They requested one last year too, which also failed. Plainville had 2 failed overrides in fiscal years 21 and 22. Mansfield went for one totaling $2.7 million in recent months, which also failed. The trend that we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of overrides, a lot of layoffs throughout the state. We are fortunate that we're not in that position right now, but I think unless something major happens in this town, and I keep saying, new growth, or if the state eventually, you know, gives cities and towns the share that they're supposed to. If we don't see something major happening, we're going to end up in the same boat. And as Bill stated, I mean, no one ever likes to hear the word override. I don't know if one would ever pass in Foxborough. One never has. Foxborough has never had an override. But where we are fortunate is that we do have the stadium, although they're not paying what we would reasonably expect if that property were to be assessed. We are dealing with that, and a lot of that, the money that's coming from, you know, those events and hotel, motel, things like that are being used to fund our capital, whereas other communities would need to borrow money each year to pay for their capital. So while we're not using free cash for our operating budget, we're using it for our capital budget, which is the responsible thing to do with that one-time revenue.
2030 that the lease would have to be renewed, is that?
2037.
Yeah,
Oh, 37, okay.
yeah,
A lot longer than I thought. Okay.
So
January
Marie,
31, 2037 is when it's over. And at that point, there's only two options. One is they either purchase the land from the town, or two is they have to demolish the stadium. So.
I didn't know that.
That's going to leave it there.
Marie, as far as like this potential override is concerned, what you're saying is that because of the reduction in state funding, like year over year, like less from a percentage standpoint in state funding, and because of a like low growth rate, that would lead us to think that we might need an override in the future.
What's happening too that's not only affecting us, but most of the communities in Massachusetts are health insurance.
Okay.
In recent years, we're looking at 14%. We met with Maya a few weeks ago, and they told us conservatively use a 15% number. Then you have your pension assessment. The 2.5, Prop 2.5 is putting a huge strain on everyone's budgets, and that was passed back in 1980. The way that passed was that the state essentially promised to fund schools at 100%. They never have. I don't think they ever will. So they figured if they did fund schools at 100%, then yeah, the 2.5 increase would be enough for the municipal side, but that's not what we're seeing. And then when you tack on your fixed costs that are coming in at much higher rates, it's not sustainable. And like I said, we've been able to stay afloat with, you know, the stadium revenues. Once again, we are using that for our capital. It's like you really shouldn't be using that money in your operating budget. It's not a stable recurring revenue source. But I think eventually we will get to where, you know, Franklin, Easton, Mansfield are. I don't know.
The soccer, Rev soccer.
Yeah, that's the other piece too, is the soccer team will be leaving. It's still a few years out, but for our projections, we use a full season of football, a full season of soccer, and then we're up to 10 concerts now. Concerts obviously can go up or down, but once you lose the revs, that's essentially $1 million hit to our local receipts. So that's something to think about as well. I mean, I think we'll be okay for now, but I don't know how much longer we'll be able to sustain this.
And I think to your point, basically by allowing us to use 3 to 3.5%, we're using our full available. So which over time, you know, as you compound it, obviously creates the problem going down the road. If we were to hold that back and say 2.5%, then you'd have a longer period of time in which you wouldn't go. You know, it's also kind of a misnomer. I mean, I say it, and we all say it, besides we've never had an override. Every debt exclusion effectively is an override. The only advantage to a debt exclusion, quite honestly, is it has a life. Life usually is 20 years. It goes away. Taxpayers don't pay on it anymore. Whereas if it's an override, it goes on forever. You know, I haven't seen a community yet do an underride. It's a capability. There's a possibility, but it's never happened. So I think that's, you know, we have chosen to do all of our capital projects through the debt exclusion process, which basically gives taxpayers that right. And as Marie has already stated, you see where they continually fall off because of the schedule, and when we replace it with another one, so we're not hitting the taxpayers harder that way. We do know taxpayers are getting to their limits relative to how much they're paying in taxes. So, you know, overrides in general are not something that people are looking for, because it's really pushing their buttons financially, and whether or not they can afford it. And for obviously the older people in town who, you know, are retired on fixed incomes, overrides are just one more, you know, nail in it. So it just makes it harder.
And for the older people, the salaries weren't what they are now. So their pensions and their Social Security aren't what people who are retiring today compared to 20 years ago. And, you know, the reality is people are living longer lives. So, you know, spreading everything out. I mean, I just want to give a little synopsis. I know there's a lot of untruths back and forth. You know, I'm only speaking for myself. I'm assuming you guys have also gotten emails from, you know, people asking us to get involved with, right now. And another elephant on the table is, you know, we have a teacher's contract that is not fulfilled, and people are now reaching out to the Board of Selectmen. I'm sure some of you guys are getting emails too. No? Okay. Just saying, you know, please have respect for our teachers. You know, I just want to openly say here, I don't think there's anybody involved in the budget process, from town manager all the way down, that have nothing but great respect for the people who are educating our children. And I hope, you know, it's not on this board, it's on the school committee. You guys, I know you guys, I have faith that you guys will figure it out. But people have come up to me and said, all this money that comes from the stadium, all this money that's going to come from World Cup, all this money. And, you know, it took me 3 years on AdCom and 6 years here to really start to understand how a town budget works. It's, you know, so when people say it, I get it. You just think that money comes in and it can be spent. So if this will just give some clarity for, you know, the handful of people that are home, that are watching, and may pass it on to somebody, it's, you know, my fear has always been, I've been the same for 9 years. Try to stay lean. I lean, and because on the flip side, I worry about what happens if we give big raises, then somewhere down the line, you know, in 2000, I believe it was a couple of predecessors before you, Marie, gave us a year when we were on AdCom, and the year was 2022 or 23, where the crop was going to hit the fan a little bit financially. Now, then we had the pandemic, and we got bailed out big with that ARPA money. If we didn't get bailed out big, so that kind of leveled us back off, and now we're going forward. I just want people to understand that, you know, it's not about not respect for, you know, but most of our unions are settled. And, you know, we have one left, and you know, if, you know, and I don't even know what they're asking for. I'm just saying, I have a feeling because you're not settled, it's getting hard to come to that agreement of what the good number is. But if that number is much higher than what every other union has settled on, in 3 years, we're going to be in big trouble. You know, I think every other union stayed right around, just about, and I think as a board, in blessing the contracts that Paige worked very hard with the people negotiating to us, we'd love to give you all the money in the world, but it just isn't there. And the reality is, the people who are paying those salaries are the taxpayers. And most people don't get the same benefits, the same health insurance benefits we get. They don't get the same raises. If you're not working for municipality or for the state, you don't get those. So you're asking people who don't get that same raise to fund your raise. So it's putting everything, all the pieces together, and trying to give fair wages, fair tax rates. You know, there's a lot that goes on, and, you know, Marie's done a great job and her team, and it's not easy, and I know what you guys are going through is not easy as well, and I just hope everyone, if you are watching, and tell people you can go back and watch this and try to get an understanding, and I'm sure if you had to, Marie, not that I want everybody knocking on your door, but, you know, like, if you need to understand, the pie is the pie. And you can't give out what we don't take in. And we're starting to run thin now. So if we start doing that now, in 3 years from now, You know, there were times when towns were giving zeros. So if you want to take that big number now, 3 years from now, you may be taking a zero, you know?
Well, worse than that, I mean, we see it in communities around us where
Yeah.
they're doing layoffs already on schools and potentially on town sides. And that's, you know, the goal here is to be able to keep the person sitting next to you that's been working side by side with you and getting the job done. And that's the process that we're trying to do with the town and throughout every department, not any one individually. So, you know, maintaining, you know, the services that we need, even though there are stressors that are pushing. I mean, I had a comment to me come about the fire contract, not the contract, the additional firemen that are being hired under the grant, what's going to happen 3 years. Well, the reality, as we stated at that point in time, they're one of the few departments that actually generates revenue based on having that staff on board. And because of that, they're effectively paying for themselves in that fourth year by doing that. Plus, they're giving us 3 years of additional revenue, which again is eating into capital costs on their side, it's eating into their operating costs. But they're the only ones that have that. And that is one of the things that's you know, displacing the values where it looks like, you know, town side is growing faster than the school side. It's one of those factors that basically is doing it, but it's not tax revenue that's doing it, and it can't be spent on anything else. We can't spend the EMS money on schools. We can't spend it on DPW. We can't spend it on anything else. It can only be spent in that one department. But again, it's generating its own revenue to do it. So it's a fair proposition to go for. But again, I think your general point, which is good, is that we respect all of our unions, and we respect all the people that are working for us, and we're hoping that, you know, obviously, you know, I do have a little bit more information on what's been offered and what's been asked, and I do think it's fair, and I do think it's something that the community can live with going forward while keeping the same services and the same people all around them, whether it's support services or whatever. So, but I think we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I think that was it. Any additional questions?
Great job, Marie.
Thank you.
Really,
Thank you, Marie.
what a fabulous job. Thank you.
All right. Guess let's-
Is the board going to decide anything tonight, or?
Yes, we do need that direction, yes. So there's well, I guess you kind of decided already what's going to happen with the millions that we're getting from World Cup.
The hundreds of thousands. Yeah.
But this is where we're at for the budget. So option 1, 2, or 3. Option 2 is the one I'm recommending.
You need a vote?
Yeah, we usually
Yes.
give that direction that way.
Yeah.
And-
Okay.
and I think just my opinion, the board obviously has its own. Option 2 has worked for us. I'm a little concerned at pushing the 3.5. I realize it fits within, but, you know, I think keeping it under that makes a little bit more sense, especially when you look going forward. It's going to put a stressor on all of us. So even though we're saying we want, you know, to maintain, you know, level services, in some cases, because of what's going to happen with health insurances and stuff like that, we won't have potentially that much money for an individual department to spend. So I would like to see it between 3 and 3 1/4, but that's just my opinion. And again, that's more because what's going to be coming at us in the next 5 years. So.
If I may chime in, even though I don't get a vote, but I agree with that. I mean, the first time we did it, we were up higher, and then when the reality is various departments have different needs, and if everybody does 3.5, and then the couple costs come in higher, then we're over that number. So I really selfishly would ask that it stay maybe closer to 3 where possible, and then, you know, knowing that certain departments or certain justified needs, we might have to pivot a bit, but it gives us a little bit of wiggle room, because if everybody comes to the top, then we're out of business before we start.
Yeah, I kind of was going to bring that up myself too, just to keep it at 3. There are times when you can go over a little bit, but I'd like to see it at 3
Well,
also.
and you know something, it's only a recommendation.
Right.
You know, we're not voting number 3 to say this is the number. So, and I want to say, I think that like one year, the board told Bill Keegan 3, and he came in at like 3.17 or something like that. And, you know, and it was, the board, we were happy to move that budget forward. Because you've been here before me, so do you remember what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
We were happy to move that budget forward because there's going to be something that's going to offset something. And can I say one other thing, just so people understand too? Because that 14% to 15% of the insurance, Bill and I were able to find out. We had a meeting with Mike Mullen, and he came up with some interesting things for employees to lower their premium, but maybe take a higher deductible. And of course, you're taking a chance, but if you really aren't someone who uses your insurance in the same way. So he came up with some great ideas it doesn't work for everybody, because if you already have existing conditions that you need those appointments, but just so people know too, that number, which I didn't know, I thought that was for everybody, that number is we're getting that number from Blue Cross because of our usage. So, because I've heard so many people come up to us and they're like, well, we're only get this much percent, but the insurance is going up by 14%. Our community who uses the insurance is driving that number. And, so it's not a number, not every community was getting that number. And I didn't realize until Mike's sitting here. Mike told us, and I was like, oh, really? So, so that number is going to change every year. Like, I know we've been more around this was the big one, because we've been more like around that 5 to 5.5%, I think. And so just so people know.
We thought this was the big one, and then we learned this year will be another big one. And to that point, to those watching at home, and we talked to Dr. Berdos and Karen about this, we're learning, like Mike Mullen mentioned, is that our experience is what does it. So I get all those postcards from Blue Cross, and honestly, I just toss them. But what they're actually trying to teach us is that if you shop around for your medical, you can lower your costs. For example, if you go to an emergency room, or you don't have a primary care or whatnot, you end up, the program ends up paying 40% more. So, and all those go into the rates and our costs down the road. So we as consumers need to start being more prudent, because while it might not hurt us, the insurance pays for it that day, but down the road, we're all paying for it. So that's something that as we've been doing a lot of insurance, we're looking into this and trying to find ways to make it better. And really, the industry is broken. We've been told, we had the commissioner of insurance tell us, basically, call your legislators, the system is broken. So when you have that gentleman from the state telling towns leaders that basically there's nothing you can do, you can't design your way out of this crisis, we're in trouble. So we had hoped last year was a blip. It's not a blip. We know that insurance is going to be just as high this year. I think it's happening across every sector. But really, what we all can do is start shopping around, get the off-site MRI. Don't go just to where they do. Ask questions. Shop around for prescriptions. We're really getting it hammered home that we do control it in some minor way by our usage. So thank you for bringing that up.
And there was just something about insurance too, and if you use it as like if you get your yearly physical, and a lot of times you can catch things early that down the road ends up costing much more money. So it's not about, when I say your usage, it's like, don't not go for your physical, but if you do go to your physical and something comes up, that something minor can be done to help fix, rather than 2 years down the road, it's become a much bigger issue, and there might be a surgery or multiple tests or things like that. So it's not about, I don't want anyone to think don't use your benefits, but there's a lot of talk about the best ways to utilize your costs.
Manage it.
Yeah.
I think when you looked at the expense side of it too, that Marie showed you, the single biggest fixed cost is health insurance. It's at $10 million. So if you're going to add 14% to $10 million, there's $1.4 million right off the bat, out the door, and on a decent sized number. I mean, that's bigger than many of the town budgets, as far as departments. So it's really, it's a significant cost, and it's really one that, with the kind of plans we have, our plans are so rich that many people don't even think about how they use it, because it covers everything. You hardly get a cost, with a municipal plan. If you go into the hospital for something, you're not going to see much of a bill. And because of that, people don't think about it, and they don't manage the plans as well as they could. it's just going to be a problem over time. And again, you know, an issue that we're going to have to face as a community, so.
Is there an opportunity along the same line of talking about educating employees of the town on better use of their healthcare, other ways to reduce the budgets? Keeping same level services, finding a more cost-effective way of delivering them? Is that all part of the budget process?
Yeah, so
Because I think that's one that, if you highlight that to the town, because you're talking about town employees and how they use the health insurance, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So there's just, it'd be interesting ways as each department's budget comes forward, have they identified some things that will cost less and provide equal or better services? Just a thought.
which is what we hope they do, quite honestly,
Right,
on each
right.
service they do. Anything else?
Motion?
We're ready to, yeah,
Do-
it's 7 o'clock, so.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask Doc if he wants to make a motion based on what Paige said. You seem to be going in that direction. Do we want to make a recommendation for number 2? And then would be a separate motion to give a recommendation of the 3%?
No, you can do it as one.
Combine it.
Okay, you want to do that?
Yeah, I'll move that we use option 2, level service budget, with a operating budget increase of 3%.
I'll second.
Around.
Around, yeah, around 3%, yep.
Target of 3%. Any
Overall.
other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none? Okay, thank you, Marie. You want to close your meeting?
Sure.
I make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? School committee is adjourned.
Motion to adjourn the advisory committee.
In favor?
We have our regular scheduled meeting, so.
Do we have to close and reopen?
I don't think you have to, because it's all one
Yeah,
agenda.
we
No,
can-
it's all in one
Can we
agenda.
take a 5-minute break?
She's a little rambunctious today.